Welcome, everyone. I am Brenda Zeda-Radido, and this is Africa Matters. The economy dominated Malawi's general election on September 16th, and fixing it will be a major headache for the next president. Can he stop runaway inflation along with all the other issues marked urgent in his inbox? Beyond campaign promises, Malawians expect the incoming president to deliver immediate and lasting change. They have a long list. They want more jobs and food security. They're also demanding an end to corruption scandals, fuel shortages, and the soaring cost of living that has spiked food and utility costs. Lamek Masima spoke to some Blantyre residents about what the next president should prioritize.
Some residents have complained of lack of drugs in hospitals, and they are hoping that the new administration will solve the problem.
I expect the new administration will ensure that hospitals have enough drugs and also that patients admitted to public hospitals are provided with food. Currently, when you go to a public hospital, you are told to buy your own medicine, and those who are admitted are forced to provide their own food.
However, several businessmen have said they've been facing challenges because of lack of foreign exchange.
I want the new leader to deal with the problem of foreign exchange shortages. I need Forex to run my business of importing goods into the country. The biggest issue that needs urgent attention is the fuel shortage, which is a result of the lack of foreign exchange. If these problems are addressed, life will improve for many Malawians.
Corruption has also been an issue of public concern to many Malawians.
If everyone knows that there's too much corruption in our country, if only we could learn from other countries, e.g. China, if any corruption is being noticed, they put that person and put him in jail.
Let's take a look at some of the data showing some of the pressing issues that the incoming president has to tackle. The World Bank considers anyone living on less than $3 a day as extremely poor. And their data shows that nearly 70% of Malawians are living on the breadline. The incoming president is under pressure to curb inflation, which has almost quadrupled from around 8% to 27% in 5 years because of repeated currency devaluations and foreign exchange shortages. 80% of Malawians, or nearly 17 million people, depend on agriculture for their livelihoods, making them vulnerable to natural disasters such as Cyclone Freddy in 2023 and the El Nino-induced drought last year, which destroyed crops and affected maize production, the country's staple food, and cut tobacco exports. Malawi heavily relies on foreign aid to fund health services and development projects. Recent U.S. aid cuts worth $350 million has led to a shortfall of about 13% of the country's national budget, according to U.S. Department of State data. In 2013, donors suspended funding after the Cashgate scandal, in which up to $250 million was lost through fraudulent payments to ghost companies for services not delivered. The alleged misuse of COVID-19 funds and mismanagement of agricultural subsidies have also raised concerns. Now let's hear more from Sisman Mutlang. He's a political analyst and a political science lecturer at Northwest University, South Africa. He joins me from Windhoek in that country. Thank you for joining us here on Africa Matters. Now, Malawi has just had its elections, but what should be the next Malawian president priorities when he takes office?
Hi, Brenda. Thanks for having me. I think what we see in Malawi, we have a huge inflation issue, and I think it's issues of cost of living, the standard of living, the fuel shortages. These are major aspects that currently affect the country. You know, the climate impacts on agriculture, and I think these are immediate issues. And then what they already are experiencing is the infrastructure development deficits. I think that as well is something the president should be looking at. It's the proper development issues in the country.
So when you talk about the proper development issues, and you've actually mentioned the priorities on what the president needs to focus on, a follow-up question would be, so what sort of policies could address, poverty in both short and long term?
Yeah, I think policies at first is to see to what extent and based on the country's capacity to subsidize those who are in agriculture, the securing livelihoods of your population as well. So is to ensure that there are safety nets implemented or ensured for the people. And from there on, the policies should be on industrialization to see how the country can enhance capacity in manufacturing, some sectors that can also absorb employment. We know the incumbent came in promising 1 million jobs, and that did not materialize for the population, particularly for young people. So the country has a huge number of youths. Those need to be absorbed in the labor sector. So I think for me, this is something the president should be looking into as a start.
So then how can the incoming president, just based on what you're saying, fix the economy to make life more affordable and mitigating shocks on its agricultural industry?
Yeah, this is, I think, not a single answer to say absolutely it will address this. We want to see, I think, a diversity in your economy, not to rely mainly on agriculture only, and to for those that are in the agriculture sector, they what I mentioned earlier in terms of state subsidies is to ensure that those who need fertilizer can afford it. And I think Mr. Peter came in also in his campaign talking on this aspect of fertilizer as well. So these are initiatives that government should be doing to ensure that the input costs are as less as possible for those that are in the sector. So that's one aspect. From there on, it is to diversify, so and encourage as many opportunities as possible. If there are business development funds that the government can introduce as well, or ensure that as many people have access to that. Encourage young people to be entrepreneurs and support their entrepreneurial efforts. I think that will encourage more people to go into job creation more than relying on foreign support.
All
So
right.
it has to be a domestic initiative in that sense.
Right. And it's good you've mentioned about, Malawi not relying on foreign support. But then how can the country reduce its dependency on foreign aid?
Yeah, dependency is all about that. You see, they import more than they export. It speaks to their capacity to produce internally. And if you don't depend a lot on foreign aid, it means you are already engaged in as broad and diverse economy as possible, and you have an income generation base in terms of your tax base. So for that to happen, you need people to be employed. You need people to be engaged productively. So for me, that's what I want to think of, that the government to invest a lot on opening opportunities for other sectors to ensure that the people are employed. If you don't do that, then you rely on your foreign aid for education as well. You'll rely on foreign aid if the state does not have the capacity to fund its own policies. So for me, I think that's the direction to be taken.
So with all that said, so what should the new president do to rebuild confidence, when it comes to donors and attract investment? And, investment is something that you've heavily touched on.
This is really, I think, in a sense of interesting, because when we look at Mr. Chakera, it was an issue of him coming in to say he will fight corruption, but he was also now, there was that response that he is now targeting anti-corruption efforts. He's now interfering with them. While Peter Mutharika was implicated, or rather accused of, having to be involved in cronyism and corruption. So these are two front runners, and both of them have allegations in terms of interfering, or rather promoting corruption and cronyism. So these are the immediate issues to be addressed. If you are to gain public trust, gain donor trust, make sure that systems are transparent as possible, there's accountability, and whatever money and resources that is received is invested for the development of the people. But if you don't do that, and you cannot show what you spend for, or there are these allegations of mismanagement, or there is also biasness in terms of ethnicity, or certain regions given more resources than others, it becomes difficult for people to support you. So I think a good governance approach and a transparency is something, principles that need to be implemented more than being political rhetoric.
All right, so is Malawi then on track to turn into a wealthy and self-reliant, industrialized, quote unquote, the upper middle income country by the year 2063 as laid out in its vision?
Yeah, I think it is. We cannot rule out a country and say you are really, isn't like you're bound to be poor forever, or you just start there as if it's your destiny. When political leaders are intentional, this can be done. If they have strategies and they commit to them, this can be achieved. If they collaborate with international partners to ensure that there is investment, that there is economic development, there is security in terms of climate impacts, ensure that your agriculture sector is also diversified, not mainly on the three main products, but to ensure that there's diversity there. It is possible. We have seen countries that have turned their fortunes in a short period of time when there is intentional leadership. But when leaders come in to enrich themselves or look after their interests and their patrons, it then frustrates the whole effort. I think this can be done. It's a matter of leadership.
All right. Sisman Mutilang, political analyst and a political science lecturer at Northwest University in South Africa. Thank you for your time and for talking to us here on Africa Matters. Still to come here on Africa Matters.
A 65-day ultimatum to evict 92,000 cattle belonging to Balalo and South Sudanese herdsmen in northern Uganda has just elapsed. I'm Razia Athman, and I'll tell you about the progress of a military operation that has pushed communities to the edge.
To northern Uganda now, where the army is removing tens of thousands of cattle belonging to nomadic herders known as the Balalo. The government accuses them of illegally occupying land and causing conflict with local communities because they're mostly from western Uganda and neighboring countries. But the move has sparked division, as Razia Athman reports from Gulu.
The Ugandan Army's Operation Harmony began in June after President Yoweri Museveni ordered the removal of 92,000 cattle from northern Uganda. They belong to the Balalo nomadic herders who've been grazing cattle on vast Acholi customary land for years. These herders are accused of illegal land acquisition, encroachment and destroying crops. So far, 45,000 cattle have been removed, but land disputes, herders refusing to move, and impassable roads have slowed the process.
What is important is to implement the executive order. Number two, make sure that all the animals exit Karuma and go to wherever they are going.
The Balalo have lived on this land for over a decade. Some share it with Acholi farmers. Like Katabura David, who arrived in Gulu 12 years ago. His farm is over 600 acres and he owns about 450 cattle together with an Acholi farmer. But mistrust and economic inequality is fueling tensions.
Iko wale wa tabia mbaya There are those bad elements among the herdsmen who can commit crimes, but not everyone is a criminal. The problem with this area is that when one person is found guilty, everyone is regarded as a criminal, and so they should all leave.
It's an area where the majority of conflicts are land-related.
Ancestral landowners in the Acholi region have recently risen to regain land that belongs to them. But the movement onto open land started 3 decades ago at the height of the Lord's Resistance Army War, when villagers were forced to flee for safety. The question the government is trying to answer now is, what happens when they return?
Land in northern Uganda is often owned communally and passed down through generations, the system known as customary land tenure.
I may own, my grandfather did, my father did, have now inherited, and I believe my children will equally follow the line. But now, who is this one who is breaking the cycle?
Even if they're evicted now, some nomadic herders return months later, restarting the cycle of conflicts over clan land. The government says all cattle should be removed from the disputed areas before any ownership claims are verified. But for many here, this is about more than cattle. It's about reclaiming identity and control over the land. Razia Othman, Africa Matters, Gulu, Uganda.
Well, Nigerian farmers are grappling with a different challenge. Their government has imposed a 6-month ban on the export of raw shea nuts. Officials say the measure is meant to boost local shea butter production and generate about $300 million every year. But critics and farmers argue the policy lacks a clear roadmap for scaling up local processing, as Ilyas Avji has more.
When Adija Rahman turned to farming shea nuts as a means of survival, she never imagined that she would one day be affected by government agricultural policy. She's among the Nigerian shea nut farmers left with stockpiles of unsold harvest after the government imposed a ban on exports. The ban was introduced over concerns that excessive exports of raw shea nuts were undermining local processing and production, even though Nigeria contributes to a global industry valued at $6.5 billion.
It feels like they want us to be crushed, because this is the money I use in meeting my children's needs, the school fees for public and Quranic school. We factor everything into the sales of shea nuts. There is nothing we can do now.
At the very least, they should have given us 2 months to clear out stock before making the ban effective. If after that we chose to hold on to our stock of shea nuts despite the ban, then the fault would be ours, not theirs.
Although the government insists that the ban is meant to revive local processors and create jobs, contracts between farmers and buyers have already been affected. Raw nut prices are already falling as truckloads destined for exports are turned back amid cancelled orders.
We used to sell the shea nuts to a company for $798 per ton. However, right after the ban, the company stopped buying because they mostly ship out the shea nuts after buying them from us. Another company buying them at the moment only pays $532 per ton because of the ban. We cannot sell our goods at that rate.
Even though a few processing companies are expected to benefit from the ban, there are concerns it could create monopolies by concentrating business in the hands of a limited number of buyers. Although Nigeria is a leading producer of shea nuts, it accounts for only about 40% of global shea butter output used in products like soaps, lotions, and cosmetics. It now joins the growing lists of countries in West Africa like Burkina Faso, Mali, Ivory Coast, Togo, and Ghana that have used a ban on shea nut exports. But for farmers like Adija Rahman, the promise of local growth remains distant, while unsold nuts pile up and livelihoods hang in the balance. Ilyas Avji, Africa Matters.
Also hanging in the balance are coffee farmers in the Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo. They're counting losses as production and export stall under rebel control and banking disruptions in the North and South Kivu provinces, as Emre Boz reports.
When coffee farmer Mudekereza Kashogushu Celestin returned to his plantation in Muganzo, South Kivu province, he was met by fallen trees and withered, damaged coffee beans. He was forced to abandon what had once been his family's source of livelihood after conflict in eastern Congo escalated in January this year. During that time, cities in prime coffee-growing regions such as North and South Kivu, renowned for their high-quality Arabica beans, fell under the control of M23 rebels.
I used to harvest $300 worth every year, but this year I harvested $50. So we asked ourselves, we coffee farmers, what are we going to do? Because of the war, some coffee rotted because we fled. When we returned, we found that everything was already rotten.
Last year we harvested 2 tons of natural coffee, but this year we barely produced 1 kilogram. Our cooperative didn't buy coffee. There is also no money because banks are not functioning.
The banking disruption is a consequence of war, a lethal cocktail that has curtailed exports. The situation is no different at the state-run coffee factory in Bukavu, where rows of empty drying beds lie dormant. Farmers fear the fragile recovery of the DRC's coffee industry could be undone, as production and export routes are already under strain.
Previously, we worked and earned money normally based on our payment agreements. But currently, we are paid with difficulty because there is no money. We are working because it's our job and we were already used to it. We cannot give up because maybe the situation will improve and everything will return to how it was before.
In the late 1980s, DRC's coffee sector was booming, producing around 100,000 tons a year, according to UN data. But production collapsed in the 1990s, battered by 2 regional wars linked to the aftermath of Rwanda's 1994 genocide. The country saw a resurgence in 2023, producing 62,000 tons of coffee. But the current crisis now threatens to erase years of progress in modernizing production methods and rebuilding global market ties. For farmers like Mudekereza, the future of DRC's coffee, and thus their survival, is as precarious as the distressed trees on their plantations. Emre Boz, Africa Matters.
To Cameroon now, where former separatist fighters who once violently enforced school boycotts in the minority English-speaking regions are now championing children's right to education. Arison Tamfo spoke to 2 former fighters who are doing exactly that.
As separatist fighters, Clovis Nasseri and Atabomberto Stajua used to attack schools, teachers and students in the Anglophone parts of Cameroon. UNICEF says a separatist war in these regions has disrupted education, leaving more than 200,000 children out of school. But 6 years ago, Clovis and Bertos began fighting for the right to children to go to school, starting by going back to class themselves.
From there till now, I've been struggling with at my own level to see how I can assist and protect the children and encourage the parent and help the government also to see how they can put certain strategy in place to make sure that school goes back normal.
After I dropped my weapons, I went back to school, studied philosophy, defended my master's, and today I am a teacher. The students I teach today can never fall into the same trap I fell because I use my story as a tool whenever I speak with the students. Despite the fact that I was one of those fighting, today I am encouraging the same children to go to school.
They have made quite a name for themselves in the country, running social media platforms that denounce attacks on schools and encourage children's education. They are part of a growing number of former fighters that have attended classes in schools they once attacked. Authorities say that more than 2,000 separatist fighters have given up their weapons since the war began in 2017. More than half of them have either returned to school or learned a trade. For the government, this is a milestone in the quest for peace and right to education. The separatists say they are still fighting for independence from the mostly French-speaking country, accusing the central government of marginalizing them. But teachers say targeting schools has backfired.
And I am particularly impressed that today we are seeing separatists, former separatist fighters who are now going back to school. This is a positive news. This is a strong message to whoever is using education as a weapon to fight the regime, that they are not actually fighting the regime, they are fighting the future of young Cameroonians.
Bertos and Clovis hope that their stories will encourage young people to fight for their future, beginning in the classroom. Aris Intamfo, Africa Matters, Buea, Cameroon.
That's our show this week. Share your thoughts and suggestions about what Malawi's next president should focus on, and leave your comments on our Africa Matters YouTube page or on X. Thanks for watching, and it's goodbye from me, Brenda Zeda Radido.